Esteemed guest, good evening. I should have printed this bigger. Welcome to the first evening of our 50th anniversary screening series. Before we proceed, I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. This meeting place today is still the home to many Indigenous people across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. My name is Alberto Zambenedetti, and I am the director of the Cinema Studies Institute. It is my great pleasure to welcome you here to the first evening of our 50th anniversary screening series. 2025 is a special year for the Cinema Studies Institute. It was in 1975 that the cluster of film courses taught at the University of Toronto since 1969 was granted the status of a college program. Cinema Studies was then housed officially at Innis College, where we are today, where it has remained ever since. In 2007, the program saw its status changed. It became an institute and first developed graduate programs for MA students in 2007 and then PhD students in 2013. We have since anointed 17 PhDs, 194 MAs, and over 2,000 undergraduates have obtained a minor, a major, or a specialization in cinema studies. CSI graduates have gone on to pursue careers in all corners of the profession, from the film industry to academia, from programming to criticism in Canada and abroad. By all standards, CSI has become one of the premier locations in the world to study cinema. The 50th anniversary series, which we kick off tonight, is meant to celebrate this long and storied history and the people who have contributed to shaping it. But it's also an opportunity to think about the students who will join us in the future and whose career we hope to launch. For this reason, I invite you all to contribute by donating to our Cinema Studies Fund if you can. As you can imagine, organizing this series was a complex undertaking, and I received much support from many people that I wish to thank. At Innis College, Ian Logan, Sean Rogers, Megan McDonald, Ben Weststraight, Shayla Anderson, and of course, our principal, Charlie Kyle. At CSI, James Cahill, Corinne Columper, Bliss Lim, Tony Pai, and Denise Ng. And I want to pause here to give Denise the proper due. She has launched into this initiative body and soul, and I could not be more grateful for her partnership in this endeavor. Without Denise, CSI has no swag, literally. At Media Commons, I also want to thank Trevor Deck and Dylan and Christina Stewart, who have been our partners all throughout. And now to the main event. It is with enormous pride that I welcome an illustrious alumna to join us here tonight, Diana Sanchez, who was elected to screen for this series Desencanto, The Disenchantment, a 1976 Spanish documentary film and cult classic, written and directed by Jaime Chávarri, and about the families of a famous poet, Leopoldo Panero. I'll briefly introduce Diana and invite her to say a few words about the film. After the screening, I'll also introduce Professor Angelica Fenner, who will be in conversation with Diana. Diana Sanchez has over 25 years of experience in the international film industry. She has led various film and cultural organizations, including TIFF, both as a senior director of film and as a programmer. In 2011, she became the founding artistic director of IFF Panama, the International Panama Film Festival, where she created a launching pad for films from Central America and the Caribbean. Diana has held programming and industry roles at a variety of film festivals and organizations, including Madrid's Cinematheque, the Rotterdam Film Festival, Miami Film Festival, Los Angeles Latino Film Festival, and the Musuem of Fine Arts in Houston, Texas. She has participated on several film festival and National Film Fund juries, both in Canada and abroad. Currently, we're very fortunate to have Diana in our ranks. She's a course instructor here at the Cinema Studies Institute, and Diana, of course, is also an alumna. She holds a master's degree in cinema studies. And this October, she launched the University of Toronto's Pop-Up Cinematheque, an incredibly successful experiment of film screenings culled from the Media Commons holding, in collaborations with the Media Commons Archive and CSI. Please join me in welcoming Diana to the podium.
Thank you, Alberto. That was a lovely intro. I'm really excited to participate in this CSI initiative. We're going to have this rare opportunity to screen Jaime Chávarri's 1976 documentary, El Desencanto. So when Alberto reached out and asked me what I would like to screen for this series, I right away suggested this film. It's a film that has kind of eluded me almost since the beginning of my career as a programmer. In 2002, I started to work as the programmer for Spain, Latin America, and the Caribbean for TIFF. And I was living in Spain at the time. And I would ask everyone there, I was really trying to delve into Spanish cinema, learn as much as I could. I would ask everyone, what's your favorite Spanish film in the Spanish film industry? And they all said El Desencanto. I couldn't find a way to see the film. And finally, a friend of mine found a VHS copy for me. I didn't have a VHS player at the time. I had graduated to DVDs. And so I had to wait until I could get my hands on the player. But once I did, I sat there and I was absolutely mesmerized by this film. The film portrays the Panero family, 12 years after the death of the family patriarch, Leopoldo Panero, who was also the poet laureate of the Franco regime. So the film has interviews with his 3 sons and widow, and it's kind of an anatomy of a family and a portrait of the conflicting egos in it, with the 2 eldest sons vying for the position of the father, or in this case, who was going to be the poet, who was going to take over the role of the poet in the family. It was filmed during the final years of Franco's dictatorship and released a year after his death. It became an instant cult classic, and it was seen by Spanish audiences as a metaphor for Franco's Spain, with Leopoldo, the father, as the stand-in for the dictator. This gave the Paneros unexpected fame and mythologized their story, their family's story. So we're going to meet, right now, we're going to go on a journey. We're going to meet Felicidad, Michi, Juan Luis, Leopoldo, and get to know their family home. These are fascinating characters to sit with for 90 minutes. What I love so much about the film and why I was so excited to share it is that Chávarri creates this quasi-Shakespearean tragedy through these interviews. It's a very multi-layered film, but it creates a really resonant narrative with very few and simple ingredients. And this is what I love about great cinema. It's with these few ingredients that a director's able to put together, and you get this incredible journey, this incredible narrative. And we're going to be able to talk more deeply about it after the film. I'm so excited to talk with Professor Angelica Fenner, and have a discussion with all of you, because I don't get to talk to people in Canada who have seen this film because they haven't. So this will be a really exciting opportunity for me. So thank you for joining us, and let's enjoy the film together. Thanks, everyone.
Él murió a las 7 de la tarde en Castrillo de las Piedras, una tarde de verano luminosa y clara como tantas otras que habíamos vivido en otros veranos.
Fue para la pequeña ciudad de Astorga uno de los días de más honda conmoción emocional de su historia, porque ese día falleció aquí inesperadamente su poeta Leopoldo Panero.
Hace un momento, con la persona que más amó en el mundo, su mujer, y con los hijos que fueron para él la palabra de su callada hondura.
Mi compañero de juego se convierte en un ser raro. Incluso para mí, es decir, raro. Es la discusión continua, son los gritos, los portazos, el alcohol mal digerido, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera. Digo mudo. No, bueno, sí, de acuerdo, pongamos. De acuerdo, pero vamos, en principio, desde luego, he participado poquísimo en esta historia, hasta hace 3 años, como tú bien sabes. Y desde luego, todo lo que yo sé sobre el pasado, el futuro y sobre todo el presente de la familia Panero es que es la sordidez más puñetera que he visto en mi vida. Que son todos una pareja de memos desde las tías, a los famosos tatarabuelos, a lo que te dé la gana.
Había una parte sordidez como en todas las familias y había otra parte que no.
Yo creo que sí. Yo creo que ahí el fin de rata es un fin de ratas. Que no somos los Beatles directamente, eso está
¿Qué
clarísimo.
coño me importa? A mí me pasamos los cojones a los Beatles, pues tampoco voy a estar aquí haciendo Luis II de Baviera a estas alturas con estos árboles.
Pero lo juegas.
Pero yo qué coño voy a jugar al Beatles, qué niño muerto.
Juegas al fin de raza. Bueno, pues sí, juegas al fin de
Porque
raza.
es un fin de raza, eso está claro.
¿Pero por qué? A lo mejor yo embarazo de pronto a una chica.
Pues hazlo, hijo, hazlo. Milagro, coño,
O tú,
ya. Pues, leche, pues,
o
una
tú,
vez.
que se llama milagro todavía.
Pues más milagro y no lo sé. Hasta ahí no lo sé.
So joining Diana Sanchez for the conversation is Professor Angelica Fenner, who is an associate professor at the Cinema Studies Institute and the Department of Germanic Languages and Literature at the University of Toronto. Her articles, book chapters, and interviews on feature films and documentaries attend to questions of diaspora and migration, feminist and queer theory, affect and material culture, and environmental humanities. She's the author of Race Under Reconstruction in German Cinema, which came out in 2011 with the University of Toronto Press. The co-editor of the volumes Fascism and Neo-Fascism, Critical Writings on the Radical Right, which was published in 2004, and the autobiographical Turn in Germanophone Documentary and Experimental Film from 2014. And the guest editor of special issues of the journals Transit, 2014, Camera Obscura, 2018, and Feminist German Studies in 2022. Currently, she's working on a Schurk-funded collaborative project titled Feminist Film History Reframed, the School 1962-68, which focuses on three women directors who emerged from West Germany's very first film production school and helped shape the contours of the cinefeminism movement of the 1970s. Please join me in welcoming Diana Sanchez and Professor Fenner. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Diana, for selecting this film and introducing us to it. I also was not familiar with it prior to this event, avowedly, I think part of why it is not so well known is because it is somehow so very specific to Spanish history, and also the way that it's made. It doesn't have an expository opening that sets the stage for you and explains that history. So I'm intrigued by that opening. I wonder if that would be a good place for us to begin, is the enigmatic opening.
Yeah, it does have an enigmatic opening. I also think it's important to give, I'll give some more background now that we've seen the film. It'll have more meaning now. So the film was initially to be a short film. And Jaime Chávarri was commissioned by, and that all happens at the beginning. So that beginning that we see, that was part of the short film. He was approached by Elias Querejeta, who is the biggest, most well-known Spanish film producer that worked with Buñuel and Carlos Saura. And Querejeta did not even want to do this film. Chávarri did not even want to do this film in the beginning. He knew Michi, the youngest son, from the nightlife in Madrid. And more drinking buddies than friends. And so he was unsure of how to approach the film, but was convinced by the story of this patriarch. And because of this event that we see at the very beginning, well, we start first with the photograph, right, of the family. And then you have all these ideas. And we were talking earlier about films that center the family. And there's so much more, there's so many more layers to what you see behind these photographs. And then we have this event where you have the statue that's about to be, unveiled. But interestingly, in that opening scene, it's all covered up with a tarp, right? And Jaime Chávarri, the director, says that he kept that there because he was showing the patriarch, but he was not going to let him have a word in this film. So I think that was one of the pieces that I found very interesting, and that opening scene, and I think it's just fascinating that we went from a short into this into this long form.
In that opening, well, the first opening really is that photograph, and at the same time, in the soundtrack, you hear the running projector.
Yeah.
And it's a strange, there's an incongruity there because you have a static image that's not moving, and yet you're hearing a motor that would imply that there is a moving image. And I know the first time I previewed this, I actually thought there was a technical problem. And later I discovered there was, because Internet Archive had a damaged copy. But regardless, in any case, it was sort of a baffling moment where you're like, is this okay? Is this, it's a little Godarian in that sense, where, you're questioning the film and its progress. And at the same time, it's also becomes very metaphorical because it's a film that is it's running. The film is running, so to speak, but the photograph is not. It's sort of stuck in time, and that is how this family is. It's as if their development has been arrested, like a freeze frame.
Yeah, and right after that, there's a very important moment where you have the first conversation with the two brothers after the mother speaks. One thing that really I found so interesting, did you see the expression the brother has when the younger brother asks, what if Leopoldo had been a part, because they planned all this, right? They planned the film. They wanted, they wanted to have their story told. What would have happened if Leopoldo had been a part of this? And his brother, looks pained, has this really pained expression. And that comes from that stuckness, that we first witness in that first photograph. It's interesting there because that's the first moment that you realize the real, that antagonism between the brothers. And they're never together. I don't know if you noticed that. It's because they were shot at different times. Right, so they couldn't get Leopoldo, who we meet in the second part of the film, to participate in the first part, except for that one moment where you just see his face. I don't know where he's walking through. They couldn't get him to participate. So he would only participate in the film when his elder brother was out of the country, and he would only do 2 interviews. That's it. By that time, the Paneros and the director were hating each other, they were fighting. The Paneros thought he had no idea what he was doing. The mother, she wanted to do this film because she had felt under her husband's thumb for her whole, their whole married life, and she wanted this opportunity to come out, which I find, it's pretty amazing. She says she's cowardly, but she's quite brave, because remember, this film was actually shown in Spanish cinemas, and it played for a year in cinemas in Barcelona. This film did extremely well in Spain, which they were not expecting, and they were not expecting it to travel at all, which it did at the time. And then, part of the reason I couldn't get it is because it was only existed on 35 for a while. There was no digital version of it, which is just a whole other conversation about why we need to preserve our film history, but I digress there. But yes, it's a family that's stuck into patterns, and I think that this, the aura that this film took on was because of the time that it came out, right? It came out right after Franco's death. It was being edited as Franco was dying. And the filmmaker did see Grey Garden, by the way, because he saw it at the Cannes Film Festival. Not before he shot the film, but before he did the editing. So he says that was a very present film for him as well. So there's this real cinematic piece that I love about the film, but it's also, you can look at it from the angle of psychoanalysis as well. I love that. This is what I like about it. Those many layers that it has. Yeah.
And with regard to the statue of the father, you mentioned that it's failed in the beginning, and actually, if you look more closely, it's actually duct taped around the mouth. Literally not giving him the words, any word in the film. But also at the end, he hasn't been unveiled. And I still don't know what Leopoldo Panero looks like. He's absolutely, simply not visible as a human figure. And that, in that regard, he's also kind of a structuring absence that actually enables the speech of the other family members. And I'm wondering if, if so often with these kind of family films, there's a mapping, either intentional or more serendipitous in this case, between family history and national history, and how that defining absence, structuring absence might be mapped onto national history.
Exactly. See, yeah, of course, it was serendipitous. You're correct, but Chávarri says he knew that there were parallels. He didn't realize the magnitude that they would take on, because there is the Franco figure, the Panero figure. The family became like celebrities after this film was released. I think a lot of people really identified with what they had gone through. I think especially listening to Felicidad, this her life for women was, it was difficult for everyone during Franco, but she was, like she had this guy, Luis Rosales, that she mentions a lot in the film. So she invited Luis Rosales to the premiere, and he never spoke to any of that family again. He got up and walked out. Just imagine the bravery of this woman to do this film and invite these people to see it. And yeah, it took on a life of its own. And this mythology of the family is really quite, this self-mythologizing that they perform. I find what I find so fascinating is what incredible performers they all are. So Felicidad, she is the only one that wrote everything down that she was going. It was her parts were scripted. The rest of the sons know, which I thought was quite interesting because it feels scripted, right? She wants to elevate her story. And that's why Leopoldo Maria his presence, getting him to participate was so important, because that's when the story is brought to, this mythology is brought to reality, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, this tension between mythology and reality. And I think, again, with family films, that's so often a tension, that each individual has a certain version of the family history, a certain perspective, and there's sort of these competing narratives, and all of them have a degree of sort of projection and wishful thinking on different levels. And in this case, with all family members have sort of endearing qualities and also quite disconcerting qualities, and they're each sort of trapped in their fantasy version of this ultimately, it sounds like, fairly dystopian family life.
Yeah, it's true. This idea of the family and the nation often, are very relatable. But what I find so interesting is that they're not there's no shame, right? There might be at moments, but they're really unabashed. They're outrageous in their speech. This is, I guess, a type of, a political, very unique political class. This was the poet laureate of Franco, right? So when Leopoldo was young, the father, he actually was in jail for being, arrojo, for being a Republican. And he had to hide all those to hide that side of his life and do a complete political shift in order to survive. And then I guess that's when the first layer comes on, right? I think that was the first layer for the father that we never meet. But that obviously affected his kids and his family. And I think that's one of the performative pieces that's, I think, really important to understand as we're watching the film. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems as if with families that sort of live in the public eye, as I guess this family did, and this is true today as well, they have to so consistently perform this public persona that it becomes difficult to discern if there is any private persona left. And it's almost like, you know, their own personal version of their ideal ego gets, it sort of collapses into the ego ideal, the version of themselves that the public wants to envision, and they don't know how to distinguish between them anymore.
And they were also they were going through a real major shift in what was happening socially. So very, very soon, I think during the time frame of the film or towards the end of it, or at least when it was released, being the poet laureate of Franco was no longer okay, right? So they also had to adjust to that shift. Because there is a film called Tantos Años Después. There's another film that Ricardo Franco made about the family 20 years later, which I encourage you to see. Because it's, they had to, really, like she says it in the film, times were changing. And how her reaction to her son, you know, I think that moment in the film when he talks about how when she sent him to a clinic rather than tried to figure out what was wrong with him, I think that is the pivotal moment in the film. When the director was able to shoot that, that's when he knew he had the film and that he had something that gave it a closure.
Yeah, I mean, that brings us maybe again full circle to the title of the film, The Disenchantment, and what does that disenchantment refer to? Because it seems so multi-layered.
So multi-layered. Yeah, I agree. I have lots of thoughts. I think I guess I can't help but think there's a political disenchantment, but also a disenchantment with this idea of this family that you had. Michi, I think Michi, they're all fascinating characters, but Michi's inability to work, you know, I found very, very, very interesting. He never held down a job. None of them did. Well, the only one was Felicidad, actually. When he died, when Leopoldo, her husband, dies, she got a job working at like a museum or something, and she loved having this job because it was so outlandish for a woman to hold down a job. So she just liked to do the unexpected, right? She liked this idea of being very unique and surprising. You know, just right at the beginning of the film, you know, she said that when she went to Astorga, they looked at her like a foreigner, not like a Spaniard, right? She liked to, presumir, as she says, like to stick out. Should we go to audience questions? Yeah, because I see some. I'm going to start with Helga Stevenson, and I'll get to you.
We have a microphone.
And then we have a microphone. Oh, or we can start right here first, and then we'll get to you. Oh, Helga. Oh, we're going to go here first. Is that okay? And then we'll get to you. Thank you. Just because the mic is there.
Hi. I was really looking forward to this film, actually. And I can see how it would have been really popular in Spain because it really referred to the Spanish condition during those times. But you wanted an honest reaction, and I'm going to give you my reaction as I was watching this film all the way through. I think this family was really fatuous all the way through. And I don't find that those characters were very interesting at all. I mean, if they came to my table to dinner, I'd probably kick them out. You know, it's just like they had no, what did they actually contribute? In the film, it didn't show. And I found the constant sort of talking about nothing that I was interested in. It bored, it kind of, I wanted to leave like 5 times through the film. I was getting nervous and I wanted to leave because I just thought they were, you know, disgusting and full of themselves in a way they actually thought they had something to offer, but I didn't, and I was waiting for that, but I didn't really, and the thing was that they wanted to extend their legacy. Well, what legacy was it really? I mean, we don't, in the film, doesn't really show much about the Leopoldo pair, his what he actually really did. I mean, you filled us in on the background, but if somebody just came in on the film and was not a Spaniard, they wouldn't really get that. They would get, you know, some very self-absorbed young men who just had a problem, all of them with alcoholism and drugs. I mean, you know, I wasn't impressed. If they had been maybe a tortured poet or a tortured artist or whatever, yeah, you know, but frankly, I'm not interested in this family, and you know, as somebody who didn't live under Franco and so on and so forth, and I know it historically, blah, blah, but, you know, from my perspective here, yeah, it was a major disappointment. So that's my reaction, sorry.
No, that's totally. I do understand. I think that's part of the film, that you do get uncomfortable. I felt really sad, you know, and it's not until you see Leopoldo Maria talk to his mother that you're really understanding just the effects that being part of this family had on them psychologically. And I don't think we're supposed to want to have them for dinner. I mean, this kind of family no longer really exists. The way they speak, you know, these literary affectations, they're performing the whole time, and that is deeply sad. But they are a product of a time in Spain that was horrible. Like, it was 40 years of a dictatorship, and I think that's why it connected so much with Spanish audiences. As a film, that you have very few elements put together here, and he has managed to create a narrative, you know, if you connect with it or not. And that, to me, is really, really fascinating. When this film came out, Jaime Chávarri, I forget what magazine it was, wrote that this is Spanish cinema coming into its own. So you don't like all the films that everyone makes, and that's totally normal and totally valid. I mean, there's always great points for discussion. So I thank you very much for that, for those thoughts, because I do understand how you would feel that. And for me, watching it and feeling that discomfort is part of what I think makes the film work as well. Thank you. Helga?
At the beginning, when she's supposedly, and the boys are going home to Astorga, right? And they're unveiling the statue of her husband.
Yeah.
So things are pretty okay if they're unveiling statues. They're about to not be okay for the family because of the fall of fascism, etc. Why, during the film, every time she gets upset, she has to run home to Astorga. Yeah. Why, at the beginning, does she say, they were mean to me, they hate me, they don't like me, I'm like a foreigner here?
Because she was originally from Madrid,
yeah.
And she felt, I mean, these small Spanish towns. Well, you've been.
No, I know, but every moment, the troubled moment, she runs back
because
to
of the house. It's the house, because that. Yeah, I don't know if you remember when she's talking about the first time she went through the house with Leopoldo, and she said, "It's so beautiful here. Mm-hmm. It's so beautiful. We should never leave here." Yeah, but no, I hadn't noticed that. I hadn't.
She felt like an alien.
Yeah,
and yet that was her touchstone.
Yeah, yeah. She is a very interesting character. Like, she's someone I don't understand. I don't, and that scene with her talking to her son, she's trying to, make light out of a lot of things, and then you realize that, her, whether she abandoned him or not, we don't know the full story. I mean, you can know the full story if you wanted to read The Age of Disenchantments, by the way, but I'll get to that in a sec. But we don't know the whole full story through the film. And in fact, they allude to the fact she kind of abandoned their son to these clinics, right? And that's something that she's not admitting to, right? Which is interesting in itself. And so, yeah, what I did also wanted to mention earlier, this young journalist moved to Spain. He's an American journalist named Aaron Schulman, And he saw this film in 2012 at his friend's apartment in Madrid, and he became obsessed with this film. And then, so he wrote a book on it. It's a wonderful book. It's called The Age of Disenchantments. You can't get it right now from Robarts because I have borrowed it, but I will be returning it if you. And it's a fascinating story. He interviews all the Panero family, the director. The director has a lot to say about how torturous it was to work with them. And just the fact that this film came to being, it was, you know, there's so many reasons why it should not have happened. I think this is with a lot of films. You know, films are willed into being. They do not happen easily, and this one is definitely an example of that. There's a question up here.
Yeah, so seems like this poet, the statue is not unveiled during unveiling ceremony, and at the end scene we also see the same one not unveiled. But he's the person that is the artist in the movie. The rest of the family, they are not the famous ones.
No.
They're just the relatives of the person who created so many literary works that will stay forever. So why is he being put down in this way? Because if it was the climate in which he was living that obviously contributed to his creation.
Yeah.
If it was not the climate, maybe he was not have become who he became, which is the most famous literary person in whole Spain. So why is this a disrespect for him? That's what I want to know.
That's a very good question, and that was definitely the very initial reviews. That was the big complaint, that this was an assassination of Leopoldo Panero, especially his friend Jaime Rosales. Like, that's why people left the theater, furious. This, I believe, from what I understand, is that they did not want. He had been such a harsh force on this family when he was alive that they didn't want his voice to be part of it. At the same time, you can't erase it. I mean, he's right there at the beginning in a statue that's not unveiled. So that
you have to separate the
right.
poet from the person.
I understand. Yeah.
His creative life from his personal life.
Right. But
He chose to live with him.
oh no, I understand. I'm saying that this was one of the reviews. Absolutely agreed with you. I didn't make, like, I don't know why that artistic choice was made, but I can tell you that sentiment was present in many of the reviews at the time when the film came out.
I mean,
any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking in relation to that comment that, well, you know how with a photographic negative, it's the inverse of what the photo is that we are accustomed to seeing, and in a way, the film is like a photographic negative of the poet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the inverse of what you normally see in the public life. What you see is sort of the sort of side effects. That's not quite the word. Nebeneffekte. Repercussions of his life within the family.
Even a picture of the family, because the father was missing. I don't consider that a picture of the family.
But that's the echo. That's the wake of his legacy.
Yeah. I think that's what they were trying to do. Yeah.
There's a question over here.
I mean, this is more just a contextual question. But
Yeah.
I mean, what is his reputation like? Like, what is the poet's reputation like now? I mean, he was the poet laureate of Franco's Spain, but I'm curious as to his legacy in that capacity.
I mean, I have read a little bit about this. I don't know. It's not what it was at the time. Obviously, his younger, Leopoldo Maria, did have some fame as a poet later on. I do know that, but I don't know. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. As an aside, I think that was a good question, because I think you mentioned something that originally you said he was a rojo, which means he was a communist. And then
yes, when he was young.
Right. Yeah. And then he changed to being a Republican. Right?
Well, yeah, he changed to being a part of the rebels, but because at the time. But yes, he was part of the Francoist government.
Right. Yeah. So he completely changed his political leaning, seemingly. Yeah. Seemingly. Yeah. And so perhaps all his work was just a way of developing a reputation in a politically correct context, and maybe it was killing him to, if he was a sensitive, I mean, I was not familiar with his work or anything about this beforehand, so I'm just supposing that, you know, if he did have this artistic greatness and he was forced to say things pandering to the government rather than what he really felt, it might have been a very difficult thing for him all the way along. And then to be lauded for sentiments that maybe he didn't really, you know, he didn't really feel. Well, you know, I think that would have a lot to do with what his reputation might be, what his work might be analyzed as after the fact. Like the whole, what I'm trying to say is the whole thing might be just a convenient, you know, he was a talented poet and his expression was just something of political convenience rather than his real expression. It occurred to me that that's a possibility. Yeah. Has anyone, I mean, has that been expressed in any way, or?
Well, except the art is not supposed to be political.
Oh, yeah. If you're the poet laureate for Franco, do you really think it's realistic to think that it's not supposed to be political in a dictatorship? I would say not. Yeah. But, okay.
Yeah, those are like the layers that they're wearing, the many masks, and I think that what you have to perform in public and private. I think it's interesting what Leopoldo Maria says, that's why he enjoyed his time in jail, because that's the only time the private and public has.
That family was really, really, really messed up.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's what Jaime Chávarri was trying to say, actually.
That came through.
Yeah, that came through.
That part came through.
But they did actually approve this. Okay, so they did so they had two rules before they started shooting, okay? One was that neither of them would be able to see the other's interviews. Like when they're being interviewed alone, the other ones were not allowed to see those interviews. And that was by Chávarri, the director. And the second one was that they would have, they all had to agree on it being shown for the film to even hit the theaters, right? And if one of them had said no, that would have been it. So they had a screening just for the family. And the only one that was Felicidad was not exactly happy with how she came off, but her kids convinced her. And that's actually how the film was released in theaters. In, I guess, November 1976, something like that. Any final thoughts from anyone? Alberto, any questions? No. There's a question here and here, yeah. There's two, yeah.
I just have a comment in that relationships are so individual that maybe the husband and the wife, we don't even know what drew them together, you know, and why they ended up marrying and having a family. And if he was away a lot as well, and she alluded to the fact that she was pretty and she was distanced from the other women, you know what I mean, around her. So there's probably some alienation, you know, that was happening there as well. So I don't know, maybe she wasn't able to give the affection, the father or the mother, to the children as they were growing up. And it didn't say if there was any other caregivers, you know, that would be able to fulfill that role.
I mean, I think it's an interesting point, again, in coming back to the title, Disenchantment. Disenchantment implies that there was a time of enchantment, and yet, for example, Michi says at some point, there may be 4 times in my life when I felt enchanted or something like that. And you know, it is a fair question. Could this family, in the way that they, in the circumstances in which they somehow grew together, or deformed one another, were they ever enchanted? And
yeah, we don't know. We don't know those times. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, thank you for both of you for your insights. I just want to, it just came to mind that some of the comments that the brothers make are highly insightful, right? There's such truth to them, and we must remember, when did it come out, in 74?
76,
I mean, this was a moment of, you know, R.D. Lang, and I mean, he was invoking Deleuze and Lacan. I mean, it's of that moment of, you know, madness, truth coming out of, you know, schizophrenia equals truth, all those kinds of ideas. So I just think it was highly insightful, and as Angelica and both of you were saying, it's really functions around contradictions, right? The entire film, from that shot, but it comes out in many other ways. But I just want to thank you for picking this film, because it's really interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, it is those contradictions. It is very contradictory throughout. Thanks, Cass.
Yeah, it's just more of a comment. I like the decision never to show the patriarch. And I think there's an echo within the film. If you recall, her reaction to her husband's death is to put a shroud over him, you know, to cover him, to, you know, almost sanctify him. And then we get the morbid story about how they're bringing his enshrouded body down the stairs, and his gigantic hand of patriarchy falls out of the shroud and is thumping on each step as it goes down the stairs. I think whatever is under that shroud, under that cover, that's the myth that the young Leopoldo is saying. You know, this movie could be about that, or it could be about the truth. And that opening conversation that they're having about the young Leopoldo not being involved at that point where he wasn't involved. And they're treating it like a scripted movie. They have their parts, they put a lot of work into it. The older brother's discussion of the fetishes, very funny, but obviously totally prepared and scripted, and all that gets disrupted when, you know, the young Leopoldo comes in, and also perhaps a kind of script, but much more spontaneous. That's where the movie starts to fray around the edges, and you know, the myth starts to crack and erode much more. So I like that decision to keep him covered for those reasons.
Yeah, and like I said, the director that's why he's the duct tape, right? He was not allowed to speak here. That now his family gets to speak. So Leopoldo, Maria, when he comes in and he says, oh, I think this movie, you know, is going to be about these myths or this really happy family, he hadn't seen their previous interviews. That's why he doesn't realize none of it is like that. And he's coming in, he's gonna bring the truth, which he does also. But I agree, I like that decision not to to have the father, because it's, you know, in a way it helps you. I think it just helps that parallel with Franco, that looming figure that's, you know, had such a huge effect on this country for 40 years. And I think that's how the parallel is maintained, and I think it's something that Chávarri had quite present during the editing process.
I think he brings the truth, but also inconsistent, right? Because in one scene he says, "We're blank slates. You can change if you want to," and he also says he never wanted to become his father. He was the least interested in becoming so. And then towards the end, he has to admit, actually, perhaps I'm the worst at this, and in fact, everything's an unbreakable circle, which is the opposite of what he was saying about the blank slate. More truthful, anyway, but also, you know, still presenting shrouded versions of himself, I guess, as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're ready to wrap. Oh, we haven't. Can we do one more question?
Sure.
Oh, two more. Sure. Two more.
Hi there. I was curious to hear, particularly about some of the things that you may have noticed in Spanish that are kind of lost in translation.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to hear more about how this film figures into like Spanish cinema, and I guess you said it's everybody's favorite there, and I was just curious to know, you know, maybe even its legacy as far as directors that speak about it. Or
So there are a few things that, I mean, there's many things, but one of the things I find very funny is that Juan Luis, I'm not forgetting their names, so he sometimes affects a Argentinian accent when he's talking about Borges. It's like so weird. And other times he tries to put on a Mexican accent. So he's quite interesting. So when I was talking about this being many people's favorite, I mean like the Spanish film industry, because this was such a surprise at the time when it came out in 1976. Right at the end of the 40 years of the Franco dictatorship, and I think it just people resonated so much with what people were feeling, and just seeing this metaphor for the effect that Franco had on the Spanish nation. I think that's what really resonated as well. Also, Grey Gardens had been out the year before, so it was Spain's answer to that film. Another piece is that at this time and through the 80s, we weren't really getting a lot of films from Spain internationally. They were going to Berlin, maybe Cannes. But in North America, there was a lot of big films by incredible filmmakers that weren't arriving here. And Chávarri is of that time. This film is of that time. That's when Elias Querejeta, I think the year before, they had made the Angelica's Cousin, the Carlos Serra film that was at the Cannes Film Festival. At the same time that they were making this, they were making a film with Ricardo Franco. There was a lot happening in Spanish cinema, but because of this time during the Franco regime, it was all very inward looking. They were more concerned with releasing in Spain than releasing outside of Spain. So in that way, it comes from a really, seminal time in Spanish film history. This is pre-Almodovar. Almodovar with Pepe Lucy Bomb is a few years later. So I think that's where it fits in, right at the beginning of democracy. Yeah, it was this was outrageous. This was an outrageous film to have, absolutely. And we have a final question over here from Denise. You get 2 microphones, Denise.
Hi. So actually you just mentioned that about how the director, I guess, had seen Grey Gardens.
Yes.
So I was wondering in what way that might have influenced him in how he decided to do the film.
Hugely. Okay, so he saw Grey Gardens after he had shot the film, but before he was in the editing room, and it greatly influenced. I mean, I think he was really excited. It was like, wow, this film might go somewhere. I didn't think a film like this would do do well so well with the public. And when it was released, it did. It played, all over Spain, and it played in Barcelona for a full year in cinema and theaters, which is amazing. I mean, wouldn't you love some Canadian films to come and play for a year in cinemas, like Chandler Levesque's next film, for example, whenever that's out. But yes, it did have a great effect on him during the editing process, and he spoke very well of the film.
So then it begs the question, why is it that Grey Gardens has become like a well-known cult hit, whereas this has been relatively like unknown?
Yeah, well, it's relatively unknown in English speaking countries for sure. I mean, probably in Spain, it's very well known. But I don't think just in general with Spanish language film in the 1970s, they weren't doing nothing around the world. Like they didn't even have a release strategy. They had no idea what to do with films. Even when I started working at TIFF in 2002, and I would go to Spain to watch films to bring here, they had no idea what they were doing. Like they would, one film I found that I premiered the very first year I worked at TIFF, I found like in some closet, and I'm like, hey, what's this? And it was this film called The Other Side of the Bed by Emilio Martinez Lazaro. And so they showed it to me, and then we world premiered it, and Lionsgate bought it like that. But had I not walked by that closet, that wouldn't have happened. I mean, just to give you an idea of how they were working with, they didn't have international release strategy at the time. I think that even 25 years later. And there's a lot of films by like in the 80s that I just absolutely love and that went to Berlin, for example, and they'll go to Cannes, but they never made it to North America, and I don't totally know why. But it's a good question. It's a good question. But the reason I mentioned Chandler Levesque is, if you don't mind, next week she's showing Arturo a los 30, Arthur at 30. It's an Argentine film. It came out last year. Also, I haven't seen it, but everyone that I know has seen it says it's really funny, it's really great. And it hasn't been released in Canada yet, so it'll be a Canadian premiere. Is that correct, or am I making that up? I might be making it up.
It's quite possible.
Yeah.
Or maybe, no, maybe she saw it at a festival,
She saw it in
but
Buenos Aires or something.
That's right,
Yeah.
that's right. So, yeah, please return for the Canadian premiere of Arturo los 30, introduced by Chandler Levesque and discussed with Professor Nadine Chen next week. Same place, same time.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Angelica,
thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.